Every night I saw a shadow standing in the corner of my room. I thought it was just my imagination until it moved. And one night when I turned on the light, it was standing right in front of me. The shadow in my room. The night was eerily silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on my nightstand. The room was bathed in a dim orange glow from the street lamp outside my window. It was nearly 2 a.m., and sleep eluded me as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Then, that feeling crept in, a strange sensation, like the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Slowly, I turned my head toward the darkest corner of my bedroom, and that's when I saw it. A shadow. It stood motionless, an outline barely distinguishable from the darkness. At first I thought it was just my imagination, maybe a coat draped over my chair, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized there was nothing in that corner that could cast such a shape. My breath came in shallow gasps. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe it was a trick of the dim light. But the longer I stared, the more real it became. I reached for my bedside lamp, my fingers trembling. The switch clicked, and the room flooded with light. Nothing. The corner was empty. A wave of relief washed over me, but it didn't last long. A gnawing feeling remained, a whisper of unease at the back of my mind. I turned the lamp off, convincing myself it was nothing, just a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. I closed my eyes and forced myself to sleep. But the next night, the shadow returned. This time I noticed it the moment I entered my bedroom. It stood exactly where it had before, an inky figure lurking in the corner. My skin prickled with an unnatural chill. I didn't turn on the light right away. Instead, I watched. It didn't move. It didn't shift. It was just there. Gathering my courage, I stepped closer, my heart hammering in my chest. But as soon as my fingers brushed the light switch, a thought gripped me. What if it moved when the light came on? The idea paralyzed me. I took a deep breath and flicked the switch. Again, the shadow was gone. The corner was empty, just like before. But this time, the feeling of being watched didn't fade. It lingered, crawling up my spine like cold fingers. Slept with the lamp on that night. By the third night, I dreaded going to bed. I stayed in the living room, watching television, until exhaustion forced me toward my bedroom. The moment I stepped inside, my eyes darted to the corner. It was waiting. The shadow was there, just as before, but something was different this time. It was closer. Not much, just a step forward, as if it had inched toward me while I wasn't looking. I swallowed a scream and slammed my hand against the light switch. The second the room was illuminated, the shadow was gone. I backed out of the room, heart pounding. This wasn't just my imagination. It couldn't be. I barely slept that night, dozing off only when the first rays of sunlight streamed through my window. By the fourth night I was prepared. I set up my phone on a tripod, pointing it at the corner. If something was really there, the camera would capture it. I sat on my bed, staring at the shadow, waiting. It remained still, silent. After what felt like an eternity, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on the lamp. Gone. I exhaled sharply and grabbed my phone. With trembling hands, I played the recording. For the first few minutes, there was nothing unusual. Just me sitting on the bed, watching the corner. But then, something changed. The shadow moved, not in a natural way. It didn't sway like a person shifting their weight. It flickered, almost like a distorted image. And then, for the briefest moment, it turned. It had eyes, two hollow white voids staring directly at me. I dropped the phone, my breath hitching in my throat. My body was frozen in place. I didn't sleep at all that night. On the fifth night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this thing control me. If it wanted to scare me, it would have to do more than just stand there. I walked into my bedroom, gripping a flashlight tightly. The shadow was already there, waiting. Without hesitation, I shone the beam of light directly at it. Nothing happened. The shadow didn't vanish. It didn't move. The light had no effect. My stomach twisted. This thing wasn't just a trick of my mind. It wasn't a shadow from some misplaced object. It was real, and it wasn't leaving. I stepped closer, my pulse roaring in my ears. I wanted to see if it would react, if it would do anything other than just stand there. And then, it did. The shadow shifted, not just slightly. Its entire form distorted as if twisting itself into something else. And then, before I could react, it lunged. The room went black, and I wasn't alone anymore. I woke up, gasping for air. The room was still dark, the faint glow of the street lamp barely filtering through the curtains. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then, reality came crashing back. I had seen it move, the shadow. I scrambled to turn on the bedside lamp, my hands trembling. The warm light filled the room, chasing away the darkness. My eyes darted to the corner. It was empty, just like before. Had I imagined it? Had I fainted? I reached for my phone on the nightstand and checked the time. 3:47 a.m., the video. I had left the camera recording. With shaking fingers, I grabbed the phone and opened the footage. My breath caught in my throat as I scrubbed through the timeline. At first, it was the same as before. The shadow stood there, motionless. But then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., it shifted. The dark shape seemed to flicker, warping like a glitch in a video. And then, for just a second, the screen went completely black. When the image returned, I was lying in bed, unconscious. I swallowed hard. This wasn't sleep paralysis. This wasn't a trick of my mind. Something had happened, and I had no explanation for it. The unseen force. The next morning, I left my apartment without looking back. I spent the entire day at a coffee shop, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I just needed a break. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. By evening, exhaustion weighed heavy on me, but the thought of returning home filled me with the dread. As the sun set, I made my way back, every step slower than the last. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different, thicker, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I hesitated in the doorway, my hand hovering over the light switch. My pulse throbbed in my ears. When I finally flipped it on, relief washed over me. The room looked normal. No shadows lurking in the corner. No signs of anything unnatural. Maybe it was gone. I let out a shaky laugh, feeling foolish. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the couch, and turned on the television. The sound of voices filled the space, pushing away the silence. I tried to focus on the show, but a creeping sensation crawled up my spine. The feeling of being watched. I turned my head slightly, peering at the reflection in the dark screen of the television. My stomach dropped. In the reflection, just over my shoulder, the shadow stood behind me. I spun around, knocking over my cup. The hot liquid spilled onto the floor, but I barely noticed. The room was empty. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just a lingering presence. It was getting closer. The scratches. That night, I made a decision. I had to confront it. I set up my phone to record again, this time pointing it toward my bed. If it wanted to come closer, I would see it. I left the lamp on and lay down, forcing myself to stay awake. The minutes dragged on. My eyelids grew heavy, my body betraying me. Eventually, exhaustion won. I woke up to a sharp pain on my arm. I sat up with a gasp, my skin stinging. The lamp was still on, casting a golden hue across the room. Confused, I looked down at my arm. 3 thin scratches ran across my forearm. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't moved. I hadn't dreamed this. Frantically, I grabbed my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. My hands shook as I scrolled through the footage. At 3:33 a.m., the shadow appeared, not in the corner, not near the door, but beside my bed. I watched in horror as the figure leaned over me, its form shifting like smoke. And then, its arm reached out. My body jerked awake in the video, and the shadow vanished instantly. My breathing came in short, ragged gasps. This wasn't just something watching me from a distance anymore. It was touching me. The unanswered questions. Morning came, but the fear didn't fade. I called in sick to work, unable to focus on anything else. I needed answers. I searched online for similar experiences, reading through endless stories about shadow figures, sleep paralysis, and supernatural encounters. Most of them followed the same pattern. People seeing dark figures in their rooms, experiencing night terrors, feeling an unnatural presence, but none of them mentioned being physically harmed. What was different about mine? I went down every rabbit hole I could find. Paranormal forums, scientific explanations, sleep disorder studies, but none of it explained what I was going through. Thought about calling someone, a priest, a psychic, even a doctor. But what would I say? There's a shadow in my room, and it's getting closer. They'd think I was losing my mind, but I wasn't. The scratches on my arm proved that. The doorway that evening, I hesitated before stepping into my bedroom. The lamp was still on, just as I had left it. I took a deep breath and forced myself to walk inside. My gaze flickered to the corner. It was empty, but I didn't trust it. Took out a roll of salt from my kitchen, something I had read about in a paranormal forum. It was supposed to act as a barrier, keeping spirits or entities from crossing. It sounded ridiculous, but I was desperate. I poured a thin line of salt along the threshold of my bedroom door. I didn't know if it would work, but at least it gave me a sense of control. That night I slept with my phone recording again, and at 3:33 a.m., the shadow returned. But this time, it didn't just stand there. It stopped at the line of salt, shifting uneasily. Then, for the first time, it moved in a way that made my blood freeze. It turned its head, not toward me, but toward the camera. And then, in a voice that wasn't a voice at all, more like a whisper scraping against my mind, it spoke. "You can't stop me." The recording ended. I stared at the screen, my entire body numb. This wasn't just a presence. It was something real, something intelligent, and it knew I was trying to stop it. The words echoed in my mind long after I had finished watching the recording. "You can't stop me." I replayed the video over and over, hoping I had misheard. But each time the whisper was there, faint but unmistakable. The voice didn't sound human. It wasn't deep or high-pitched. It was something in between, something unnatural. I gripped my phone tightly, my pulse pounding in my ears. Up until this point, I had convinced myself that whatever this shadow was, it was just a presence, something watching, maybe even something trapped. But now, I knew better. It wasn't just observing me. It was aware of me, and worse, it wanted me to know that. A fading sense of control. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on my bed with every light in the apartment turned on, my phone clutched in my hands. I scrolled through websites, searching desperately for anything that could explain what was happening to me. Demonic entities, residual hauntings, interdimensional beings. None of it felt like a solid answer. The salt had done something. That much was clear. The shadow had stopped at the doorway, shifting as if unsure whether it could cross. That meant there was some kind of rule, some sort of limit it couldn't break. At least, not yet. I shuddered at the thought. Morning eventually arrived. The first rays of sunlight spilling through my window. The light brought little comfort. I had stayed up all night, and exhaustion weighed on me. But I refused to let my guard down. I needed a plan. Seeking help, I decided to reach out for help, but not in a way that would make me sound insane. Instead of calling a priest or a paranormal investigator, I started with something simple. I went to the bookstore. I found a section on folklore and hauntings, picking up a few books about shadow figures. Most of them described these entities as watchers, spirits that observed people but rarely interacted with them. But my situation was different. The shadow in my room wasn't just watching. It was growing bolder. I flipped through pages, searching for anything that could help. One passage caught my attention. A shadow presence is often drawn to fear and attention. The more one acknowledges it, the stronger it becomes. My stomach twisted. Had I made it stronger by paying attention to it, by filming it, by reacting to it? I closed the book, my hands slightly shaking. If that was true, then everything I had done so far had only made things worse. The unwelcome return. That night I debated whether I should even go back to my apartment. A part of me wanted to check into a hotel, to put as much distance between myself and that thing as possible. But another part of me knew that running wouldn't solve anything. I had to face this. I arrived home just after sunset, hesitating before stepping inside. The air felt thick again, like the pressure in the room had shifted. The salt line was still at the doorway, undisturbed. That gave me a small sense of relief. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The apartment was too quiet, not just normal quiet, but an unnatural silence, as if the entire place was holding its breath. I swallowed hard and made my way to the bedroom. The first thing I did was check the corner. Empty. I I let out a shaky breath. Maybe the shadow wasn't coming tonight. Maybe the salt had done more than just stop it at the door. But then, something caught my eye. The mirror. It was a full-length mirror I had leaning against the wall near my closet. Normally, I didn't pay much attention to it, but tonight, it felt wrong. Slowly, I stepped closer. My reflection stared back at me, tired and hollow-eyed from the lack of sleep, but something felt off. I tilted my head slightly. My reflection didn't move. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. A cold wave of fear washed over me as I slowly raised a hand. My reflection didn't copy me. Instead, it stood still, staring. Then it smiled. A slow, unnatural grin spread across its face, stretching wider than any human mouth should. I stumbled backward, slamming into the nightstand. My lamp wobbled, but didn't fall. I forced myself to look away from the mirror, reaching for my phone with shaking hands. I turned back. The reflection was normal again. My own pale, terrified face stared back at me. I gasped for air, pressing the hand to my chest to steady my breathing. This thing, it wasn't just in the corner anymore. It was finding new ways to show itself, new ways to break the boundaries, breaking the connection. I grabbed the mirror and turned it to face the wall. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to risk looking into it again. My mind raced. If acknowledging this thing made it stronger, then maybe ignoring it was my best option. I took a deep breath and did something I should have done days ago. I spoke. "I don't fear you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You have no power here." The room remained still. I clenched my fists. "You are not welcome. You can't control me." Silence. I forced myself to lie down, leaving the lights on but closing my eyes. I refused to check the corner. I refused to let it win. And for the first time in days, I slept. The warning. I woke up just before sunrise, feeling strangely at peace. No nightmares, no scratches, no heavy presence in the air. Had I finally weakened it? I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Maybe ignoring it had worked. But as I got out of bed, my foot brushed against something on the floor. A piece of paper. Frowning, I picked it up. There was no writing on it, just a single dark handprint, larger than any human hand. My blood ran cold. I wasn't done with it, and it wasn't done with me. I stared at the paper in my hands, my fingers trembling. The handprint was dark, almost black, staining the page as if it had been burned into it. The shape was distorted, the fingers too long, too slender. It wasn't human. My mind raced. Hadn't left any paper on the floor before I went to bed. I hadn't heard anything during the night. But somehow this had appeared. A message. A warning. I forced myself to breathe. This thing, whatever it was trying to tell me something. Or worse, it was trying to break me. I had spent the past few days feeling like a victim, like something helpless in the face of the unknown. But I wasn't powerless. I had to fight back. Research and desperation. I spent the entire morning researching every possible way to get rid of whatever had attached itself to me. I read about rituals, cleansing techniques, prayers, anything that might work. Salt had slowed it down, but it hadn't stopped it. Ignoring it had given me one night of peace, but it had come back stronger. That meant I needed something more. As the day stretched on, I made a plan. First, I removed every reflective surface in my apartment. The mirror was already turned to the wall, but I covered it with a thick sheet just to be safe. I took down picture frames with glass and even put my phone screen face down whenever I wasn't using it. If this thing had found a way to manipulate reflections, I wouldn't give it the chance. Next, I went out and bought more salt, along with sage and candles, things I had read about in various forums. Some people swore by them. Others said they were useless. I didn't care. I would try anything. As the sun set, I stood in my apartment, staring at the walls, the floors, the dim corners of the room. Would it come back tonight? I already knew the answer. The ritual started with the salt. I didn't just pour a line at the door this time. I made a full circle around my bed, ensuring I was completely surrounded. Then, I lit the candles, placing them at the four corners of the room. Their soft glow flickered against the walls, casting long shadows that made my stomach churn. Finally, I lit the sage, letting the smoke drift through the air as I whispered words of protection. You are not welcome here. You have no power over me. Leave this place and never return. The room remained silent. For the first time in days, the air felt lighter. I exhaled, relief washing over me. Maybe this would work. Maybe tonight I would finally be free of this nightmare. I crawled into bed, exhaustion weighing on me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The darkness returns. I woke up gasping for air. The candles had gone out. The sage had burned to nothing but ashes, and the room was darker than it should have been. The street light outside still shone through the curtains, but it barely illuminated anything. It was like the shadows had thickened, swallowing the light whole. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body tensed. The salt circle was still intact, but it didn't matter, because the shadow wasn't at the door this time. It was inside the circle, right next to my bed. I sucked in a sharp breath, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The figure loomed over me, its form shifting and twisting like smoke. Then, it did something it had never done before. It reached for me. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. My limbs were frozen, my breath trapped in my throat. The shadow's elongated fingers stretched closer, closer, and then pain. A sharp, burning sensation seared across my chest, as if something had clawed through my skin. My body jolted, and suddenly, I could move again. I scrambled backward, gasping for air. My hand flew to my chest, feeling the tender, stinging skin beneath my shirt. The shadow remained still, watching. Then, slowly, it lifted its hand. I braced myself for another attack, but instead, it pointed, not at me, at the floor. Confused, I followed its gesture. My eyes widened. The salt circle, a small gap had formed where I had shifted in my sleep, barely an inch wide, but it had been enough, a voice from nowhere. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest like an unseen force. Then I heard it again. You can't stop me. But this time the voice wasn't just in my head. It was right next to my ear. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned my head slowly. Nothing was there, but I could feel it. Breathing, watching, waiting. I didn't think, I acted. With a desperate lunge, I grabbed the nearest candle and struck a match. The moment the flame flickered to life, the shadow recoiled. For the first time, it moved back. It didn't vanish. It didn't disappear, but it reacted. That meant it could be hurt. With trembling hands, I grabbed the other candles, lighting them as fast as I could. The warm glow spread through the room, pushing back the unnatural darkness. The shadow twitched, its form shifting erratically. Then, with one final flicker, it was gone. The air returned to normal. The weight on my chest lifted. The room felt empty. I collapsed onto the bed, my entire body shaking. Had I won, or was this just another game? The aftermath, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat awake, staring at the spot where the shadow had stood, waiting for it to return. But it never did. By morning, I checked my chest in the mirror. 3 faint red scratches ran across my skin. Not deep, but real. Proof. I knew then that this wasn't just a dream, or sleep paralysis, or stress. This was real. I had spent days fearing it, feeding it with my terror. But now, I knew the truth. The shadow wasn't invincible, and if I could make it retreat once, I could destroy it. I spent the next day preparing. I didn't go to work. I didn't check my phone. I didn't eat. All I did was research. The scratches on my chest still stung, a constant reminder that the shadow had touched me, that it was real, but more importantly, that it could be hurt. The candlelight had forced it to retreat. That meant it feared fire, but I needed something stronger, something permanent. I dove deeper into the darkest corners of the internet, reading stories of hauntings, possessions, and curses. Some were clearly fiction, but others felt too real to ignore. One thing kept appearing in every discussion. Shadows thrive in fear and darkness. Take away their source of power, and they weaken. I thought back to everything that had happened. The shadow had appeared in my room, the one place where I felt most vulnerable. It had used my reflection, my fear, my own mind against me. If I wanted to stop it, I had to take back control. I had to end this. Setting the trap, I waited until nightfall, my heart pounding as I set up my plan. This time, I didn't just pour salt at the door. I covered the entire apartment in a protective layer. Every doorway, every window, even the vents. I lit every candle I had, their flames flickering in the dim light. Then, I stood in the center of the room, gripping the matchbox tightly, and I called it. "You don't control me," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Silence. I forced myself to take a deep breath. "If you want me, then come get me." The room grew colder instantly. The shadows deepened, stretching unnaturally across the walls and ceiling. The candles flickered violently, their flames bending as if caught in an invisible wind. Then I saw it, emerging from the corner of the room, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. But this time, it didn't just stand there. It moved. Slowly, deliberately, it glided toward me, its presence heavier than ever. I clenched my fists, refusing to step back. The shadow stopped just inches away. And then, it spoke. "You are mine." The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was certain. The fire within. I didn't hesitate. With a quick motion, I struck a match, holding it between us. The flame cast a warm glow, pushing against the darkness. The shadow flinched but didn't retreat. Not this time. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Fire alone wouldn't be enough. I had to break its hold completely. I thought about what had drawn it to me in the first place. My fear, my attention, and then I understood. I had been feeding it all along. I had given it power by acknowledging it, by reacting to it. So I did the hardest thing I could. I let go. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You don't exist." The air crackled. The temperature dropped even further. "You see me?" The voice wavered, less certain now. I took a step forward, pushing the flame closer. "No, I don't." The shadow twitched, its form distorting. "You fear me." I exhaled slowly. Not anymore. The candles flared, their flames rising as if responding to my words. The pressure in the room shifted, something unseen breaking. The shadow trembled. Then, with one final distorted screech, it shattered. The darkness collapsed inward, sucked into itself like smoke vanishing into thin air. And just like that, it was gone. The aftermath, I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. The air felt lighter. The room was warm again. For the first time in days, I knew it was over. I cleaned up the salt, blew out the candles, and finally, let myself sleep. No nightmares, no whispers, no shadows lurking in the corners. By morning, the scratches on my chest had faded. It left no trace behind. But I would never forget. I had faced the darkness, and I had won.